Caleb was only back for a week to settle his father's estate, but that week had turned into a labyrinth. Even with maps and a compass, he could no longer trust distances, and the clock had become his greatest enemy. Every night, his house was slowly, imperceptibly shifting by a few feet. Now, Caleb knew. He wasn't just at home. He was at the center of someone's game, and this something was waiting for him to take the final step to complete the circle. His father's death was inevitable, though never welcome. Caleb Mitchell had left Oak Creek, West Virginia, 10 years ago, promising himself never to return to this forgotten hollow where every old barn and trail concealed the confusing stories his father, Sam, loved to tell. Now, Caleb was back to fulfill a final duty, selling the farm, turning it into cash, and permanently forgetting this land perpetually shrouded in mist and the whispers of the woods. Oak Creek, nestled between two mountain ridges, was known for only two things: a dying coal mine and an improbable number of unexplained disappearances over the past century. The locals always offered one explanation, which Caleb, a freelance journalist with a UVA degree, considered absurd. The shifter, his father's house, an old two-story farmhouse, stood at the edge of the village, almost merging with the field that stretched toward the dense forest. Caleb spent the first week sorting through belongings. Rusty tools, old blankets, and countless notebooks where Sam meticulously recorded his observations of nature, the sky, and phenomena. The old neighbor, Mr. Grayson, visited him on the second day. Grayson was a thin, hunched man with eyes that held a perpetual fear. "Glad to see you, Caleb, but not under these circumstances," Grayson said, clutching his hat. "Your father, he was a good man. Knew this place too well. Even better than I do." "Yeah, he was stubborn," Caleb replied, trying to be cordial. "Just trying to clear things out. Lots of junk. Those old notes. Was he still writing about his forest stories?" Grayson looked up, and there was no humor in his eyes. "Sam wrote about the shifter. And you should know, Caleb, the shifter is strong now. It doesn't sleep. Ever since the mine closed and folks started leaving, the places have become forgotten. And he loves forgotten places." Caleb just sighed. "Mr. Grayson, they're just myths. People disappear because of the weather, wild animals, or they just ran away from here." "No." Grayson shook his head. "Sam knew. The shifter isn't a beast. It's a feeling. It's the whisper that convinces you you're seeing your home. It's the light that looks like a saving lamp, but leads you deeper. It makes you walk in circles until you're exhausted, and then something else comes to finish the job." That conversation stuck in Caleb's mind. The next day, he stumbled upon an old newspaper tucked beneath a stack of old bills. The headline was old, but chilling: "Teens rescued after night of wandering in Black Hill Field." Caleb read the story, and his hands trembled. It was an exact repetition of the stories he'd heard as a child, now backed by a police report. At the start of winter, two boys, Mike and Jake, were returning to the village after a party. Instead of taking the long paved road, they decided to cut across the large, empty field. The field was a direct path to the village center, and in the distance, they could see a solitary, saving light, the lamppost near the old gas station. They walked toward the light, but the light seemed to move away. They walked for an hour, then 2, then 3. They shouted, but their voices seemed to be swallowed by the air. The light remained at the same, unchanging, unreachable distance. Exhausted, they finally collapsed near something tall. It was a giant haystack, left from the autumn harvest. They crawled inside and slept until morning. In the morning, when they woke up, they saw it. They were not deep in the field. They were only 100 yards from the gas station. The entire field they had been crossing for hours was actually a 5-minute walk. And the most terrifying detail, around the haystack, in the morning frost, were clear tracks. Numerous human tracks that walked in a perfect circle around the haystack all night long. Someone or something had circled them, waiting for them to emerge. Caleb tossed the newspaper aside. It was madness. It had to be hypothermia, hallucinations. But those tracks were not hallucinations. He walked over to his father's old wooden desk. Sam's journal lay open on the last page. It's not just the light, Caleb, if you're reading this. It's also the white dust. It comes at night when the moon is hidden. It makes you want to see what it is. It calls you. And when you walk towards it, you step onto the path of a shifter. And then you are home forever. Caleb felt a chill penetrate his skin, a coldness that had nothing to do with the room temperature. He realized his father had left him a warning, his only true inheritance. Caleb decided he wouldn't believe it until he found proof. He began studying his father's notes. He searched for logical explanations, rare weather phenomena, microclimates, even theories about infrasound. But the more he read, the deeper he sank into Sam's world. His father described the shifter not as a demon, but as an energy vortex arising in places where deep layers of iron in the soil met water. A vortex that distorts time and space. The following week, Caleb drove to his favorite childhood spot, an old pond in the woods where he and his friends always fished in the summer. The weather was hot, summery, a contrast to the oppressive autumnal atmosphere at the farmhouse. He wanted to forget the shifter just for a moment. Around 5 in the afternoon, he left his fishing rods and stepped into a thicket to relieve himself. That's when he saw it. 30 feet away, between the trees leading down to the pond, was a white spot. It didn't glow, but it was so perfectly white, so wrong amidst the green leaves and gray shadows, that it drew his gaze. It looked like a perfectly formed patch of fog that should have been motionless, yet it was moving. He felt the same strange impulse his friend had described, the desire to look closer. It wasn't fear, it was curiosity bordering on obsession. He needed to know what it was. Caleb stepped out of the bushes and walked toward the white spot. He was sure it was just a plastic bag or maybe old polyethylene. He walked and walked, but the spot remained at the same distance. It was like a treadmill. You move, but the scenery doesn't change. He felt a slight dizziness. He tried to turn back, but the path he had taken was gone. The bushes looked identical. The forest was a monolithic green wall. Suddenly, somewhere far away, he heard dogs barking. It wasn't just barking. It was his dog, Rich, whom he had left in the yard at the farmhouse. The barking was so loud and hysterical that it broke through the fog. Fear. Genuine, animal fear, like when he was little and got lost in the woods. Caleb turned and ran. He ran away from the white spot, toward the sound coming, it seemed, from the heart of the village. He ran, stumbling over roots and branches, feeling no fatigue. He burst onto a clearing, and from there, onto the dirt road. The road seemed too bright. He ran home. When he finally collapsed on the porch, gasping for breath, his dog Rich ran out and started licking his face excitedly. Caleb struggled to lift his wrist to check the time. 8:15 p.m. He had left at 5 p.m. He had been gone for 3 hours and 15 minutes. He had walked 30 feet from his rods, and the white spot, which he'd walked toward fruitlessly, was a 5-minute distance. He had been in the shifter's loop. He had walked in an invisible, distorted circle created by the entity. But the worst part, his backpack, which he had left by the rods, was by the front door. His fishing gear, his supplies, everything lay on the porch as if someone had carried it back for him while he was in the loop. This wasn't just a myth. This was a living architect of disorientation. After the incident of the pond, Caleb was no longer a skeptic. He was terrified, but now he was also an investigator. He locked himself in the house, spreading out maps of the area and his father's journals. Sam Mitchell wrote that the shifter was usually active in forgotten places, but when it focused on one person, it would create its loop around their home. The next night, Caleb stayed awake, sitting by the window with his father's rifle, which he found in the closet. The moon was hidden behind heavy autumn clouds. It was pitch dark. Around 2 in the morning, he heard a sound. It was the creak of the old, ungreased hinges on his barn door. Caleb cautiously peeked out the window. The barn hadn't been used in years. He saw the barn door slowly open, and a faint, greenish light spilled out. It wasn't a flickering light. It was a glow, as if emanating from another dimension. It was weak, but it cast a perfectly sharp, circular shadow on the ground. He felt the pull to look at it. The desire was physical. It's your father. He's waiting. He wants to show you something. A soft, yet authoritative whisper entered his ears, even though the windows were tightly shut. Caleb gripped the rifle. He knew, if he went out, he would be caught in the loop again. He ran his hand along the wall, searching for the switch, and finally found it. He abruptly flipped on the floodlight that illuminated the backyard. When the floodlight's beam, cutting through the darkness, hit the barn, the greenish glow vanished instantly. The barn door slowly closed. But when Caleb looked down, he saw that the barn was not where it should be. It was 50 feet closer to the house than before. It was impossible, as the barn was firmly fixed. It was an illusion, but it was so perfect that his brain refused to reject it. The shifter was playing with distance. The next morning, Caleb found evidence in the yard. On the dew-covered grass, there was a perfect mowed strip of grass leading from the corner of the house to the old well and back again. It looked like a lawnmower track, but perfectly circular. He remembered the tracks around the haystack. This was the shifter's loop, the circle he would have walked for hours, exhausting himself. Caleb knew it was over. He couldn't stay here anymore. He had to escape Oak Creek. Caleb called the realtor, explaining that plumbing issues forced him to leave immediately and promised to forward all documents. He had only one mission: get out. He loaded his old pickup truck with only essentials. He didn't take any of his father's notebooks, not a single object, except for his keys and phone. The shifter, he suspected, was tied to the place, not objects, but he wasn't taking chances. It was midnight. The only road leading out of Oak Creek passed over an old, narrow bridge across the river, which the locals called the Bridge of Vanishing. Caleb drove out. Moving along the country road, he tried not to look at the Black Hill field where the teenagers had wandered. He reached the bridge. It was long, antique, with metal trusses hanging over the dark, fast-moving river. As he drove onto the middle of the bridge, he stopped. The shifter was waiting. Ahead of him, right in the middle of the bridge where he needed to drive, two bright yellow lights appeared. They were perfectly round, like the headlights of a car parked on the road, but they didn't reflect off the metal of the bridge. Caleb slammed on the brakes. "Stop. We're almost home. I see your sleep." The whisper was now clear, three-dimensional, and echoed inside the cab of the pickup, as if the demon was sitting in the back seat. "This isn't my home. I'm leaving," Caleb shouted back. He turned on his high beams. They should have flooded the lights, but the light was simply absorbed. The yellow lights remained in place. He tried to move. He slowly pressed the gas. The pickup moved, but the speedometer showed 40 miles per hour, and the car seemed to be crawling in place. He was caught in the loop again. The shifter was playing with him on the final frontier. Caleb realized they wouldn't let him leave. He couldn't defeat an entity that manipulated space using physical force. He shut off the engine. "Rest. Just sleep. It will ease the pain, Caleb. Let me take you." Caleb's eyes began to feel heavy. The sleep deprivation, fueled by weeks of terror, was taking its toll. He made one last, desperate effort. He remembered how his father taught him to overcome disorientation. Don't trust what you see. Trust what you know. He closed his eyes, and he began to remember. Not the lights, not the white spot. He remembered the map of the bridge, how many metal trusses he had to pass to reach the other side. He opened his eyes. The yellow lights were still there. Caleb pressed the gas again. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at the stopwatch on his phone. 30 trusses. For minutes at 50 miles per hour. "I know this distance," he whispered, ignoring the quiet, threatening whispers of the shifter. In 3 minutes and 52 seconds, he should be across the bridge. At the 3 o'clock mark, the yellow lights began to merge with his hood. They were 2 feet from the truck. At the 3:30 mark, he heard a scream. Not a whisper, but a genuine, furious, inhuman shriek right in front of the bumper. The lights morphed into 2 massive, burning eyes, and a long, black shadow briefly appeared between them, reaching for him. But he didn't swerve. He kept going, following only the time. At the 4 o'clock mark, he felt the pickup slam into something that felt like a wall of hot air. Boom! The car lurched violently. The lights vanished. Caleb slammed on the brakes. He opened the door and stumbled out of the truck. He was standing on the solid ground of the other bank, outside Oak Creek. He had won. He had broken the loop. Caleb drove all night. He didn't stop until he saw the first signs of a major city. He checked into a motel and collapsed onto the bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in a week. His sleep was peaceful. He was in a snow-covered field, and he saw a haystack. The haystack was large, warm, and cozy. But then, above the haystack, he watched a white spot appear. It was motionless, but slowly, two long, bony arms began to stretch out from it. The arms began to draw in the snow. They drew a perfect circle, and in the center of the circle, a wide, satisfied smile. When the smile was finished, a voice that was neither a whisper nor a scream, but a calm, friendly voice, resonated in his mind. "You have seen me now, Caleb. Now you know where I am, and you will always know where to return." Caleb woke up, sweat pricking his skin. His phone lay on a nightstand. Google Maps was open on the screen, and without him even touching the phone, he watched the cursor slowly move on its own. The cursor stopped on the map of West Virginia, right over the spot labeled Oak Creek. The shifter was not tied to the place. It was tied to the consciousness of those who had seen it. Caleb was now a carrier of the shifter, and he knew that sooner or later he would return to his trail to finish what had begun. Nowhere to return. Caleb woke up, sweat pricking his skin. His phone lay on the nightstand. Google Maps was open on the screen, and without him even touching the phone, he watched the cursor slowly move on its own. The cursor stopped on the map of West Virginia, right over the spot labeled Oak Creek. The shifter was not tied to the place. It was tied to the consciousness of those who had seen it. Caleb was now a carrier of the shifter, and he knew that sooner or later he would return to his trail to finish what had begun.